It has been a season where it's all gone right for the Pico American Dream. A wire-to-wire win in Tri-Cities last week. 4 victories in 6 races for driver Dave Villwoff. Owner Fred Leland poised to win his first ever national championship. Then this. Will the Dream Team backup boat be up to the challenge of hard-charging Mark Tate and the Smokin' Joes? Auburn's Steve Wilmer desperately wants to win in front of the hometown fans on the course where he has had little success and no victories. Or will the Miss Budweiser, gone from perennial winner to also ran this season, muster the speed it has lacked to win a single race this year? And with Chip Hanauer on the beach, will Mark Evans, or Nate Brown, or Mike Hansen drive into Seafair history? Some answers when the checkered flag falls later today on this year's Texaco Cup at Seafair.
He's in tight through that corner.
The 1996 Texaco Cup at Seafair is brought to you by Texaco. Add more life to your car. Take it to the star. And by Southwest, official airline of Seafair, with low fares on every flight, every seat, every day. Fly Southwest Airlines, celebrating 25 years of love from Southwest to you. And by Dodge. See the great lineup of Dodge cars and trucks at your local Northwest Dodge dealer. And by U.S. West.
The boats are on the log boom. The clouds are in the sky. A lot of gray around Lake Washington and the Puget Sound today, but we are here to go Thunderboat racing. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Rabel from Kiro TV, and welcome for the next 7 hours and change. Join us for the most thrilling sports that you'll see out here on Lake Washington anytime during the year. The Thunderboats are back, the unlimited hydroplanes, and we've got it all for you right here. The Texaco Cup at Seafair. Big day of racing planned for you, wonderful air show, and we hope at least halfway decent weather if you are at home right now and planning on leaving the house in the next few minutes to come down to the shores of Lake Washington. Joined now by my co-anchor on Kiro News, Margaret Larson, who will be helping us out both down in the pits and all around the lake shore and the area here with, as we expect, perhaps as many as 250,000 people to be down here to watch the race today.
Could be, but the weather may be a factor. I'm no Harry Wappler, but it's a bad sign at the Summer Festival broadcast. If you're wearing a parka, we are expecting a little bit of rain today, gray skies all day. We were hoping for some sun breaks, but probably not. So if you don't head down here, please stay tuned. We'll be on for 7 hours, bring you everything. We'll go down to the pits. We'll take a look around with the crowds, and we'll give you live reports all day long.
For those of you that remember 1 year ago today, you'll remember that we sat in a cold, almost driving rain at times. Windbreakers and slickers were not nearly enough. The poor guys in the pits and the guys out at the start-finish line, and most importantly, all the fans, really was a damp, dreary day. We're hoping for better weather than that today, although we have had our first cancellation of the air show. The Golden Knights, a wonderful parachute team, was to begin right about now. They have canceled because of the low ceiling. So we'll wait to see if conditions improve out here. Speaking of conditions, let's head out to the start-finish line, where our Mike Fitzsimmons and John Walters. Mike, longtime hydro expert. John Walters, of course, still in the boat business. They're both standing by to talk a little bit about what we can expect out here today and what will this weather mean for the racing today. Mike and John.
Well, Steve, starting right out, it will mean that the turbine engines will perform to their maximum efficiency, and that's good news. If you happen to be an engine expert, that means that your motors are going to perform very, very well for you today. The big concern that I would have, however, is that that fly zone down in the start-finish line, or rather from the start-finish line down into turn number 1, where we've seen 3 boats, 1 light and 2 unlimiteds, blow over. And John, I think the wind's going to be a concern for all the Chiefs out here today.
Yeah, the wind's starting to blow right down the front straightaway here as the guys are going to the starting line. And as you mentioned, with the cool temperatures and the thick air here, we've got we're really close to sea level. The boats are going to fly and push real easy. That's good for the engines in that they make an awful lot of horsepower, but if the boats tend to fly, which we've already seen, 3 of them get upside down, the guys are going to have to stick them down a little bit harder.
I think we're talking about a race that most of the crews would be wise to allow to come to them rather than try to go aggressively after it, at least in the early going, and see how things unfold.
I think so. I think that most of the teams know that the water conditions can get really lumpy here in Lake Washington, that the wind can change, without very much warning. And with the way that things have gone so far this year, it's been somewhat of a survival race. And you can't win the race if you don't see the checkered flag. So the guys are going to try to be a little bit conservative here, as conservative as you can be. We've got a field of extremely fast boats and an extremely competitive team. So conservatism is really something that the guys don't really understand very much.
And Steve, I think the other thing too is that we have more dark horses on Lake Washington today than I think I can remember at any time. And isn't it amazing? Miss Budweiser is one of them.
Isn't that amazing? You're absolutely right. And dark horses, interestingly enough as well, I can't tell the horses because they're all wearing jackets today. They have to stay warm and dry. Speaking of wearing jackets, the wettest people, aside from you last year, were our guys in the pits. Tony Ventrella and Bill Rocky and Rick Corella all down there were just soaked.
It was a monsoon, and remember the forecast was that we would have sunshine by noon, so people showed up in shorts and whatnot. And by the time I got here, around 11 o'clock, everybody was wearing hefty bags. They had pulled out trash bags, made a hole in the top, and were wearing that over their heads, so that told you something about what the day was going to bring.
Well, let's see the attire of the day. Our intrepid pit crews, as you see folks down along the shore right now, some of whom looks like they even camped out a bit, had the tents out there. But let's check in with Tony Ventrella, who's down with all of our pit guys. Tony.
Steve, we are in summer attire today, expecting warm weather, temperatures in the mid-60s. So what the heck, I was lying about the warm weather, but maybe it won't rain. We're very optimistic. I'm down here with Bill Rocky, Rick Corella, and Chip Hanauer. We're going to spin around, take a look at what we're going to cover. Obviously, the Miss Budweiser is behind me. That'll be one of my boats. Some people thinking they will get their first win of the year. Bill Rocky will be over close to the Pico American Dream. Bill?
Tony, last week I was over in the Tri-Cities, and a lot of differences here. First of all, it was 100 degrees. I think this course is going to be a lot more unpredictable. You kind of felt Dave was going to win last week. I think it's going to be a different story here. I think it's up for grabs.
All right, we're going to have a lot of fun out here. Rick Corella will be near the Smokin' Joe's out by the point, and actually all over the place. And Rick is the only one with shorts on, but that's a story for later.
That has its own reasoning. A great story today. In the spirit of the Olympics, we have our international flavor, the Aussie Endeavor, sponsored by the Outback Steakhouse, has just qualified this morning. Look forward to seeing how they run today and kind of giving us that Olympic touch to the Seafair festivities.
All right, Rick. And Steve, we're joined by Chip Hanauer this year, who is not driving, but is a broadcaster instead. We're happy to have him here. Steve, it would be Chip, wouldn't it? You would not change your name to Steve.
Steve's up there.
Although there was a thought about that. Why aren't you driving?
A lot of injuries. I've had 4 years of a lot of broken ribs and broken back and concussions, and I started off the year with an accident this year and thought I need to step away a little bit and let myself heal up.
Chip, glad to have you with us. We'll have fun today.
I'm really looking forward to it. This is a new challenge for me, and I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, Steve, back to you upstairs. I think we're going to have some fine weather and lots of great boat racing today. And we are in summer attire. We expect to stay that way for the rest of the day, no matter what it does.
All right.
Unless it rains.
Yeah. Unless it rains, of course, yeah.
Confidence is high, but there's really no reason for it.
And I just want to make sure that you're talking to this Steve and not the Steve down there in the pits along with Tony. By the way, the other thing that we're going to do is, Margaret, you've got a very interesting story today, and we're going to be following it, the vintage hydroplanes.
We are so lucky because the Thunderboats are back on Lake Washington. People who remember Seafair from the 50s and 60s remember these old boats with the piston engines and that unique sound, and they're going to be running this morning. We'll bring you live pictures, of course, and I think that's going to be sort of a wave of nostalgia for people who have been in Seattle for a long time. Remember all of that.
For those who remember and always wanted to ride in one like the Hawaii Kai, you can tell them exactly what it was like because you're going to show them a little bit later,
We're
right?
going to take a ride in the Hawaii Kai, about 125 miles an hour, just a nice little spin out on the lake, and we'll do that a bit later in this hour.
We've got lots happening because we're here with you the rest of the day. Kiro TV. Coming up, we've got the Ivers Vintage Hydroplane Race. Heat 1A, we're going to be racing about 11:30. We've got some time to chat, however. Come on back. More of the Texaco Cup at Seafair right after this. Back on the shores of Lake Washington, the tugboats are here, the barges are here, a lot of pleasure craft are here as well, and the fastest boats in the world are here set to go racing in just about an hour or so. Welcome back, Steve Rabel with you here, the Texaco Cup at Seafair, and we want to show you a little bit of our coverage now. How do we bring you the best coverage in the business? This is an Emmy Award-winning crew here. Let's tip our hats to all of them here with Kiro TV and our production arm, but let's show you the camera shots that you're going to see during the course of the day. This is Pat Marley out on the north turn. Our number one camera give you the good shot of the boats coming down the straight and into that treacherous first turn as the weather either turns bad or stays at least semi-rideable today. Roger Gilbert's out at the start-finish line. He's in our camera number 2. Is that camera number 2 looking back at us? It is. Roger, thank you. You got a shot of us. We're in the pits, of course, on the tower here overlooking it all. Roger, thank you. The start-finish line. Here is our pit tower camera. This is Fred Monroe. Right there. You're looking across the lake. Those are the homes out on the shores of Lake Washington. That's the log boom out there. All the lovely craft standing by, waiting to see air show, waiting to see boat racing today. Out on the south turn, this is the new kid on the block. This is Tommy McGill. Here's their shot from the south turn. So you get a look up the north end. Water doesn't look too bad right now, but wait till those hydroplanes get out there and start churning up the situation. Let's go to our hill camera. John Tong, 47th and Bradford. This is up on the top of a hill. This is a great camera shot. You'll see this during the course of the day. You see the Mercer Island floating bridge in the background. We can give you the entire race course virtually from our camera angle on 47th and Bradford. George is in the number 6 camera pit. There you go. Looking down the line at all of our boats. Tail ends right there. Water just to your right. Craig McCauley, number 7 camera, also in the pits. The DeWalt's Tools boat. And all the other hydroplanes lined up. Pico American, you see the nose of that sinking in the camera shot right there. Finally, CB. There he is. On camera number 8 in the pits. That's the Budweiser team and the rest. He'll be covering that angle for us. Bill Rocky and our pit reporters down there as well. And finally, well, we don't have the chopper up yet. We're going to get Chopper 7 pilot Clark Stahl and cameraman Bill Heinlein. They will be joining us as well to give us the overview and the wonderful aerial shots that you'll be seeing of all of our racing today. Now, what we hope we don't see, we always hope for a safe race out here. What we hope we don't see from any of our camera angles are the flips and the accidents that we've had just in the last couple of days. First, though, we want to go back and show you one of the reasons Chip Hanauer is not driving. This was Detroit, the Gold Cup. And Mike Fitzsimmons, take a look and talk about Chip getting airborne over the Smokin' Joes.
Boy, that was a nasty-looking accident, no question about it. And the fact that the boat plunged the way it did back to the water with the canopy lid missing was particularly dangerous.
All right. There you guys.
Checking that out, that was really a nasty kind of a crash. It had the potential for, John, so many more things that could have been worse with the collision with the Smokin' Joes, and
yeah, it surely did.
They have the thing come apart in terms of the lid, and that's been kind of a controversial lid that Chip perhaps could talk about a little bit as far as that particular canopy is concerned. And the big concern there, of course, was the exposure of the driver to the
two
impact
drivers,
of the water.
Actually, yeah, we're both in trouble there. And when Budweiser got up, and you can see that the boat's really riding very loose right here. I mean, he was destined to crash whether Smokin' Joe's was beside him or not. Mark just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time.
And this is just one of the many kinds of accidents that Chip was talking about, and that was a nasty one, all right. Steve?
All right, Mike, thank you. And we are joined now, and so let's turn to Chip Hanauer, who's come up from the pits. And Chip, we just got done watching the pictures once again of the Gold Cup situation. It was a frightening moment. Unfortunately for you in the last several years, not a moment that has been uncommon for you. You've been upside down in that boat.
And that's why I'm here today. I've just had too many accidents the last 4 years. And it doesn't really matter what the cause of those are, whether it's the boat or me or the team. I had to take myself out of the equation. So I enjoy being here.
All right. Talk about the Gold Cup, though, for just a moment. You went over. Give us an idea of what happened to you, the injuries that you sustained, and how are you feeling today?
What's interesting watching that tape is you saw me right after the accident sitting up, and apparently I walked out of the cockpit and walked into the patrol boat. I have no recollection of the next 45 minutes or any of that happening. Oh. And that was what was disturbing to me. And a lot of the team wanted me to come back and drive the next day. And I just felt I couldn't. You know, when there's 45 minutes. Going into the corner, I was out in front. We had a great start. I was real happy. The right sponson got up in the air. I went over the top of Smokin' Joe's. At that point, I there. I looked conscious and aware, and I wasn't at all. I got back, and I aggravated my back again, and I had another concussion. And as you know, being a football player, concussion injuries can be cumulative, and I thought I better stay away for a while.
Are you ever going to drive again?
I don't know. I really have no agenda. I just know that I needed to be away from it right now. We'll have to see. I want to let what's going to happen, and see what happens next year.
All right. We'll talk more about this, and the controversy has sort of grown. Not to put you on the spot, but we're going to talk about that a little bit today. The Budweiser camp, they say the boat is running fine, and as you said, you needed to pull yourself out of it so they could see if it was the boat that was the problem, or in fact, if it was the driver that was the problem, and you're giving them that opportunity and also giving yourself that opportunity also.
Exactly, like in football. Again, I'm sorry to keep using that same analogy, but if things aren't working, I think a lot of times you just change the quarterback and just see if that'll spur something. And I wanted to see the same thing and step away and see if the team can kind of get things turned around.
Bernie Little's a hard charger. What's your relationship with him today?
Bernie has been wonderful. He has been wonderful through a lot of things that we've gone through in the last 4 years, including this latest situation. He's been very supportive. He tells me he understands that he doesn't want me in a boat that he feels that I don't have confidence in. And I just couldn't ask for more. Owner. He's been wonderful, and he's been not only a great owner, but he's turned out to be a very good friend, and that's a surprise. When I went to work with Budweiser, I thought, Bernie and I had been at loggerheads a long time, and I thought, well, maybe we'll get together, we'll get along for about a year, but I can't imagine it going on. Now here we are, we're actually being great friends, and I hope that relationship stays forever.
All right, well, we talked to Bernie Little about all this as well, and he talked a good deal about the boat and about his present driver and former driver. Let's hear from Bernie Little.
When we run to win, we run to win, and we're on the ragged edge. And we've had our boats upside down every year about, I guess. And with the truth's the truth. And so we're going to go back in the storybook and see if we get a little less high tech and build a safer boat.
All right, nobody wants to win more than Bernie Little, although he's going to have a lot of competition out here today with Pico American and with Smoke and Joe's and all the rest. We'll talk more about that. Speaking of Pico American, it has been an interesting weekend for the guy who appeared to be a shoo-in for the driving championship this year, Dave Vilwalk. He got the boat upside down as well. Mike Fitzsimmons, take us through what happened during a practice run yesterday morning.
It's a familiar venue on the race course, and he just plain got some wind and blew the boat over, came over backwards, hit on the transom. Dave helped himself out of the cockpit, and fortunately for him, unlike Chip, he remembered getting out of the boat. He was not shaken up nearly as badly as Chip was in that Detroit accident, and this is a place that just likes to eat boats up, and the problem is there's a gust of wind that comes out of that landmass where the hillside tapers back down to the shoreline on the boulevard there, and if the boats get caught on a roller and catch wind at the same time, there's almost nothing you can do about that. It just goes away.
And one of the things that happened there as well, besides the wind, and Dave was going the very fastest part of the race course. Right here, the propeller shaft breaks.
Yes,
when the propeller shaft breaks, you lose all the lift from the propeller, and the transom settles a little bit, increasing the angle of attack, and it's a big kite at that point.
That was actually the catalyst that started everything, and the propeller, when it goes away, it's that secondary shaft, and it went away right there. And, of course, once that happens, the bottom of the back of the boat settles back down again, and we got a big kite, as John says, and away it goes. Fortunately, it did not sustain severe damage, hull damage, and so under the circumstances, the boat is going to be repairable quite quickly. In fact, they probably could have repaired it for the race today, but they happen to have the backup boat, which just happens to be the Gold Cup winner in the winter at Phoenix, so they have a lot of depth in Fred Leland's team, and it's possible for them to go to that backup boat. What a nice backup boat.
Yeah, the backup boat really isn't a bad piece to have in the pits,
No.
and that thing's plenty fast. I think the new boat is just a little bit quicker. The thing that they've got a little bit of an advantage here is that besides, yes, indeed, their backup boat isn't quite as quick as the other boat, but they still got lane choice, so they get the inside lane and the shorter way around, so that might even things out for them.
So under the circumstances, they probably were not set back all that far, Steve.
I don't think so. Back to Steve.
All right, well, we probably ought to take a moment here also. We've got a couple of more. The boat's getting upside down. The Spring Air with Rick Christensen and the Phil Boncini's light boat. So let's go ahead and show you those pictures. And again, same thing going into the turn there. All right, we saw, that was the Spring Air, right? Rick Christensen.
Right. Now this particular boat, now we're looking at Phil Bonaccini, and this one is a very, very light boat, 2,200 pounds. It's 4,000 pounds lighter than everything else that went into that corner, and he just simply got it too light, and when the bow goes up, he's completely out of control right there. He almost made it over to the top. John, you tried that once, and he almost made it over the top, but he pounded down on the right sponson and then came upside down, and he was okay. Steve, he came out of it just fine.
All right, good. Well, that's the kind of weekend it's been so far. As we said, we hope it doesn't happen over the next couple of days, or at least today, the rest of the afternoon. As you hear the vintage boats back there warming up behind us, the Thunderboats are firing up. We've got the Ivers Vintage Boat Parade coming up in just a couple of minutes. We also have more from the air show, and we've got some unlimited hydroplane racing coming your way. Stand by. From the shores of Lake Washington, the Mercer Island Bridge, boats getting themselves prepared out there for a day of racing. You're watching a Coast Guard demonstration. This is part of the Great Seafair Air Show that goes on all day long. A water demonstration, a rescue demonstration, right out in front of the pit area. And again, about every 15 minutes or so, we'll have a different group coming from the Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard taking part in the big air show here today. But the big stories that we want to follow as far as boat racing concerns actually happen down in the pits, as you would expect. The boats, the drivers, the owners, and to start with the storylines that he'll be following today is our Tony Ventrella. Tony?
Thanks, Steve. The big story on the east side of the pits may be the Miss Budweiser. As you know, the Miss Budweiser has multiple boats. They always have more than one. They've got two in the pits this year. They will be running the boat directly behind me. It's the T5. It is a brand new boat. They ran it once this year in Evansville, did not win. In fact, have not won yet this year, which is a little bit of a problem. They're trying to do it today. They feel that this boat will run better in the rough waters, and it could be a bit rough out there today. Mark Evans is the driver. He likes the choice. They're going to run the T5 at least in the second heat of the day and see how that works out. Obviously, they've got another one in case they need it. Moving on down the line, we've got the Mill Bay Casino with Mitch Evans. And let me add that of the four boats that I'll be covering today, it's pretty obvious, at least at this stage of the game, that the Miss Budweiser is the one that really has a chance to win. The other ones are long shots, and I think the crews would agree with me on that. The Elam Plus with Nate Brown is a little bit further down, and then the Kiss 106 with Steve David, which basically lost its sponsorship and is getting sponsors as it goes to each city. So they're holding their own, but that's about all they've been able to do so far this year. The big question, can the Miss Budweiser get its first victory of the year in the brand new T5? That won't be answered until about 5 hours from right now, Steve. So it's going to be fun down here today. Back to you.
All right, Tony, let's go to Bill Rocky now, who's standing by also in the pits. What's the big question there today, Bill?
Well, we got a couple things going here with the Pico American Dream. First of all, as you know now, Dave Vilwalk flipped the boat right behind me here. That's the one he wanted to drive, but that's not going to happen. Instead, he'll be driving this boat over here, and he says he has about as much confidence in this boat as he has that. This one's not quite as fast on the straightaways, but Dave Vilwalk won the Gold Cup in this boat behind me, so it can win. Now, believe it or not, we already got some controversy. Let's go over here and I'll tell you what's going on. One of the other camps protested the engines that the Pico American Dream are using, and with me now is Crew Chief Ken Dryden. And Ken, if you could explain what happened here.
Oh, we've just had an interpretation of the rule that states no L11 parts, and we're running one of our can liners as a L11 can liner, and the only difference is they move 4 bolts, and it's not a power secret or anything, so we're just going to pull that can off and put a regular one on, and away we'll go.
All right, so it's easy to fix and it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem at all. You know, if it was a speed secret, all of our motors would have it. As it is, just one.
All right, well, so far we're not really sure who exactly protested this, but it did happen, and they'll fix it here in Pico. It'll be fine. Now, over on the other side of the pits, Rick Corella, and let's see what's going on over there. Rick?
On the sunny side of the pits over here on the West Beach, the real story today is going to be, can Steve Womer get his first win here on Lake Washington? The Camel-powered Smokin' Joe's has been running consistently all year. They're second in points. They're giving it everything they've got, but they've never put together a victory on this lake. They've been running consistently to win. Earlier, or I should say earlier, the past few years, they've come here, they've gotten the final heat. They had the disastrous blowover a couple of years ago. Steve Womer desperately wants to win on this race course. The other big story over on our side of the pits is somebody who's just going to be happy to be in the race. They've come here from half a world away. The Aussie Endeavor, sponsored by the Outback Steakhouses, just qualified this morning. They've never run on a race course this big. They don't know how fast this boat will really go at the end of the straightaways. So it's going to be a learning curve from the fastest to somebody that's just happy to be here. So all day today we'll be covering these stories. We also have a past winner on our side of the pit, Scott Pierce, a winning boat. George Woods drove over here a couple of years ago, is down on this side of the pits also. So we have some competitors. We're looking forward to a great day of racing. Back up to you, Steve.
All right, Richard, thank you very much. Rick Corella, Bill Rocky, and Tony Ventrella down in the pits. Again, the Coast Guard water rescue demonstration continuing out here in front of the pits. We hope that no one has to be rescued, as we've all been talking about. We hope it's a day of safe racing. And speaking of racing, it's time now to check the draw for Heat 1 and Heat 1B. Mike Fitzsimmons taking a look at the list, running it down here. Pico in lane 1. And what do you think about that lane situation there for Dave Villwock?
All things considered, the Pico American Dream after the blowout wound up with a pretty safe Heat 1A, I would say. An opportunity to test the boat, test the equipment, and not to anticipate a whole lot of pressure. I would expect that the pressure would come, though, from Ken Muscatel and the computers and applications. And don't count out Jimmy King in the Linwood Honda Graham Trucking or Steve David. They're strong enough to put some pressure on, but I think that the Pico is the class of that fleet, and if you could get a heat draw to put your driver back in the race boat and get him reacclimated after a blowover, that's about as good a heat draw as you could ask for.
All right, Mike, let's look at Heat 1B now, the lineup as we have it. There you go. This should be the race of the at least first heat run, and that is Smokin' Joe's and Miss Budweiser. And don't forget about DeWalt Tools in there with Mike Hansen.
No question about that. That's one of the sleepers, Mike Hansen and the DeWalt Tools. They made some changes aerodynamically to that boat, and he was running much stronger in Tri-Cities than he did any place on the Eastern Circuit, so you cannot count these guys out. But the Smokin' Joe's and the Budweiser are going to knock heads there, and the real question is which mark will come out on top, I think. Also, I know that John Walters will be very interested in the Appian Geronimo's run with Larry Lauterbach in this particular one. This is the first time that the newly acquired number 19 has had a chance to go.
Yeah, we're kind of coming out of the box with a brand new boat here. Of course, we had the blowover of our own last weekend, and the Appian Geronimo ended up upside down. Pretty well dashed the hopes of us, doing very well this race. Then it turned out that Bob Fendler and Jerry Rise with ETMA Corporation in Redmond stepped up to the plate and said, we need to go racing next weekend, and gave us a second chance, and we were able to get another boat here and come back. And so now we're going through the learning curve of trying to set up a new boat. We just got the old lump, running pretty good, and then balled the thing up last weekend, and now we're out here trying to start all over again.
The other good news, of course, is that the Outback Steakhouse boat will renew the Aussie Challenge, which left Lake Washington in the year 1978 when Bob Saniga drove the Miss Bud, and they finished third here. I don't expect a high finish for the Australian team. This is their first opportunity to race in America, and they're getting used to a big course with that turbine.
Yeah, they've got a lot of things to learn when they come here to run with these guys, and the race course is so much bigger, the water conditions are a lot rougher, and the competition's much faster. So back to the guys at the tower.
All right, John, Mike, and we should probably also mention, you talked about balling up the boat a week or so ago, John Walters. We're just very happy to have John Walters with us today because he balled himself up a little bit of an injury. He's walking around on crutches, but he's a tough competitor, and he comes to play every day, don't you, John? And we're glad you could be with us again this year.
It's an awful lot of fun to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity that you guys give me to come out here and talk about the sport that I love. I've mentioned it before that you guys make it really easy and make me very comfortable. It's a little bit different this year in that I'm still acting as a crew chief with the Appian Geronimo U19 team in the pits there, and I can be in contact with them by cell phone if need be. So we're kind of a high-tech crew chief today.
And I want you guys to know how much I appreciate the fact that I got a free ride up on the golf cart because John was on crutches.
I'm going to save those crutches for later on because they're better than any pit pass I've had so far.
Anything for a free ride for either of you guys. Appreciate it. Let's take a break. We're going to go racing here pretty soon. We're also going to bring you the vintage hydroplanes and Margaret Larson's ride along. Stand by. Simmons saw when he was a kid, when Rick Corella used to run over the hill in the Mount Baker neighborhood down to the lakeshore and watch the Hawaii Kai and Jack Regis and all the rest. The Northwest, but we have become indoctrinated into the spirit of vintage hydroplanes, haven't
Well,
we?
it's not hard to learn to love it. The Hawaii Kai that you saw just there is the third one. This is not, of course, the original boat. This is a restored vintage hydro. There are 3 of them out here today. The Miss Thriftway, the Spirit of South Park, and the Hawaii Kai. We're going to be out on the water reminding people of that great old sound of the thunderboats. It reverberated for miles, at least 6 or 7 miles from this lake, and was the sound everybody associated with racing and seafarer for decades. Wow.
The noise you are listening going over us right now, a helicopter of some kind. Is that the Coast Guard chopper that
Looks
just flew
like
over?
it.
Yeah, a little demonstration continuing out here as part of the air show. You had a chance not only, as we look at the helicopter, you had a chance not only to meet with the restorers of the boat, and we'll talk about a group of kids a little bit later who helped in the restoration of one boat, but you actually had the chance to ride along, and not a lot of people get that opportunity.
Just a few weeks ago, Ken Muscatel, the owner and the driver of the Hawaii Kai and the Hydroplane Museum, both deserve a lot of thanks for this opportunity, but we wanted to see what these old thunderboats were all about, so we headed out on the lake for a very special pre. They're loud. That's pretty loud.
That's why they call it thunderboats.
And are they ever fast?
120, 125. Plenty fast. Fast enough that God's looking you square in the face.
So what do you do if you're invited to ride along? I don't know anything about this. You suit up. I'm very excited to know that this is flame resistant. I had no idea flames were an issue, but apparently they are.
Landing right on the cockpit.
Should I be worried about this?
Oh no! They both went over.
Hey, what could go wrong?
Ripping the canopy off and causing major damage.
So I'm set, right?
You're set.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Stop.
What am I doing? Should I start screaming now or should I wait? It's actually much more a thrill than a scare, kind of like being the puck in a game of air hockey, skipping over the water, blasting through the wind and spray.
Noise ferments your bone marrow when it's really rolling. Coming in.
The corners are so much fun, skidding around the corner part. That's great.
Well, thank you. That was fun.
Thank you. I enjoyed that more than I can say.
Something. That's why they call them thunderbolts.
Now that is some fun, and if you want to hear that sound again, those great piston engines, those boats are going out on the water about 10:50. They'll be headed out to take a few laps in a race, the Ivers Vintage Hydro Thunderboat Race, starting at about 11 o'clock this morning. I can't wait to see them, and more importantly, I can't wait to hear them. That is just an amazing sound.
You came back, you didn't have a lot of oil spray or anything like a lot of the old drivers.
No, although that's part of the
Yeah.
experience when you're out on the Thunderboats, and one of the reasons why the guys who actually drive them don't miss them as much as those of us who watch them.
When we come back, we're going to go back out to the water. We'll actually show you the boats today, those vintage hydroplanes. We'll give you a sense for the importance of hydroplane racing as it relates to seafarer, a long and storied history. We'll tell you about that and much more when we come back. Wow, how's that for watching boat racing in style? All they could hope for today is maybe a little more sunshine, and we may have a sunbreak or two before it's all over. Meantime, wow, there's some tradition for you, the Miss Thriftway. Being lowered into the water, going to be a part of the drive-by, the little parade race of vintage hydroplanes, sponsored by Ivers, and that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. You know, as we've talked about so much vintage hydroplanes, well, in the days when they were actually new, the history is so great with seafarer and hydroplanes. We thought we'd take a look back and just show you exactly what the hydroplanes have meant to seafarer over the years. It has become one of the familiar sounds of the Northwest summer. The whine of a turbine-powered unlimited hydroplane. They are fast, often dangerous, and very expensive. But there was a time when it was all very different, right down to the sound.
Where I went to school was several miles from Lake Washington, but you could hear them. And when you heard them, you just knew distinctly what it was.
They called them thunderboats for a reason, and they've been as big a part of seafarer over the years as the water they race on. Hydro expert Mike Fitzsimmons.
Well, I think boat racing is a part of Seattle's culture. I think it's like the Yankees are part of New York's culture. It's an inseparable reality. It's been going on for nearly half a century. The people in the city of Seattle have continued to embrace it as an important event on Lake Washington, rain or shine.
It began in Seattle in 1950 with a car dealer named Stanley Sayers and a boat he called Slow Motion 4.
With her magnificent rooster tail flying, the slow-mo roars through the traps in less than 21 seconds.
Sayers, for whom today's hydro pits along Lake Washington are named, helped make Seattle a boat racing mecca. And in these days before the Mariners and Sonics and Seahawks, fans, a couple of 100,000 of them, packed the shoreline and gathered on the old Mercer Island floating bridge to cheer their favorite boats and drivers. And if names like Jones, Regas, and Slovak became household words in the Northwest, the name Bill Muncy was royalty.
The checkered flag is ready for Muncy in the Thriftway. Miss Thriftway wins easily.
Muncy's record of career wins still stands today, 15 years after his death in a hydroplane accident. The Thunderboats, and Seafair in general, had become the Puget Sound's annual summer celebration, a yearly reminder that the Pacific Northwest was the ideal place to live, work, and raise a family. But there were tough times. By the 1980s, deaths on the water and rowdy fans on the beach brought changes to better protect drivers and bring families back to the boat races. Seafair Director Kate Hastings.
The Texaco Cup at Seafair is the biggest sporting event in the Pacific Northwest and brings 250,000 people to the shores of Lake Washington for 3 days of high-speed deck-to-deck racing.
There has also been a very real business connection between the Hydros and Seafair.
It is the largest of the revenue generators of the Seafair program, and the revenues generated from the hydroplane race are used to pay for the other celebrations that are a part of Seafair as well. And that's always been the case. And since that's always been the case, and that's always been an integral part of what makes Seafair work, hydroplanes are inseparable with Seafair.
Hydroplanes and Seafair, a 47-year marriage of business and fun that shows no sign of slowing down anytime soon. And we bring Chip in very quickly to talk about those vintage hydroplanes, and you remember those, don't you?
That's because I'm kind of a vintage guy. I'm, one of the only drivers that's been driving this year that ever drove behind an engine, a 12-cylinder Rolls-Royce or an Allison who had the fumes in the oil. So, yeah, I'm that old.
And the tradition is still great, and the sport is actually getting stronger, I would say, than it was maybe even just a few years ago.
The sport seems to kind of ebb and flow, but ever so slowly. Mm-hmm. It certainly hasn't gotten to where NASCAR or IndyCar is. But then again, people have been, prognosticating its demise for years. But here we are, so it's still here.
Gray, drizzly, or sunshiny, we're out here on the shores of Lake Washington, and we're going to be back with more racing in just a couple minutes. Taking a look now at the slow-mo pits as they get ready to put that vintage hydroplane in the water. This is the Thriftway, and they're having a bit of a problem with it. Do we have Rick standing by down there?
I'm over here at the Hawaii Kai right now. There's been a problem with the oil filter. They trailer fired the boat, blew a filter gasket out. Right now they're circumventing that. They're pulling the filter out. They're going to run the lines direct into the engine. Jerry Hopp standing by. They hope to get this boat in the water in the next couple of minutes. It's got a little race pitch over here. The excitement just went up a couple of notches. Back up to you, Steve.
All right, well, that happens when you're fixing to go out racing, especially when you're not sure how these boats are going to run or if they're going to run. Mike Fitzsimmons, let's talk about these boats a little bit. The history, how they work. Why is it they've gotten away from them? Just because of the speed that the turbines bring to the sport?
Well, not just that. The design of these old race boats, either what you call the shovel nose type hulls, they're rounded hulls. The center of lift was way forward in them. They're far different from the boats that run today, aside from the fact that they still have two sponsons and a prop, and the suspension process is the same. These boats were very different. We worry about blowovers with the modern unlimited hydroplanes. They were more worried about stuffing the nose of these when they would porpoise. The worst thing that could happen was that the nose would dive in under the surface of the water and throw the driver in a catapult out, as happened in 1962 when Dallas Sarge went blasting out of the Miss Seattle 2. and that was a typical type of an accident that this kind of a boat had. These engines, the bottom line is in boat racing or in any kind of racing, how much horsepower you have or power to weight is so important, and these engines weigh about 6 times what the turbines weigh and turn out the same sort of horsepower. So obviously if you want to be light and fast, a turbine is just too enticing when compared to these kinds of engines. But the turbines are not young engines either.
No, they're not. They actually were designed and really started being built in the early 50s. One of the things that happened with the Merlin-powered boats and that is that the engines were getting extremely difficult to find. Not only were they pretty inefficient in comparison to today's power plants, the hull, the propellers, everything has really gone a giant step there. But one of the things that we did in Dave Herrensberger's Pay 'n Pack way back in 1980 was because they were expecting so much maintenance and it took so much effort to keep the engines running, and you had to have so many of them. When we came back out with the Pay 'n Pack in 1979, 1980, we fully expected that we'd be able to build 3 complete engines instead of 16 or 20 engines, and be able to concentrate our efforts on making the boat more efficient and working on making propellers and sponson design and other aspects that we weren't able to do when we were working so hard just to try and keep the motors playing.
John, excuse me, let me jump in. I just want to say one thing real quickly here. Spirit of South Park, as you see being lifted off the trailer right there, an interesting story about that boat, not the least of which is that one of the partial sponsors of that boat is Kiro TV. There's our little bug sticker on the nose of that boat. But also, this was interesting in that a group of kids took part in helping to refurbish that boat. And they'll actually be helping out down around the pits, or at least showing people around, maybe not in the hot pits, maybe not down on the finger piers, but they did have a hand to play in it. We'll show you some pictures of that and those young people, and a great learning experience for them coming up a little bit later. The boats are going in the water. We're going to have a little bit of vintage hydroplane action coming up here in a bit. A little nostalgia for all of us. Then we've got the national anthem, and then we're going to go racing here in a couple of moments. There you're looking at, oh my heavens, JP Patches and the old day. Chris Wheatus. There you go. JP and the old boat. There you go. We'll be right back.
I remember that.
Patrol boats in the water, keeping spectators as well as drivers safe. As again, we await the vintage hydroplane run coming up here in just a couple of moments. There, the South Park now, Spirit of South Park, is in the water. And that boat, again, as we talked about, worked on by a group of kids, neighborhood youngsters, all in an effort to give them a little understanding of not only the sport, but the responsibility of helping to work as a team. There's the Hawaii Kai. And Chip, you've seen that boat, the big pink beauty, over the years. Talk about, briefly, if you would, your getting into this sport. I think a lot of people may know some of the story, but you watched these boats as a kid, and then you were in a boat, a small boat at least, as a kid yourself.
Well, I think hydroplane racing is part, as Mike said, it's part of the fabric of our community here. I mean, it's intertwined with all of our childhoods, all of us who grew up here. I remember there was a time when all 3 network stations covered the race all day long. It was that big a deal. And I remember our family always used to put the television out on the deck, and we'd have the neighbors and the family. And I think every single person that grew up in Seattle has stories and has memories of what it was, what Seafair was to them. And if the Seafair race were not part of Seattle, I think a huge chunk of what makes us a community would be gone.
Well, it's a great festival. I think I mentioned a couple of nights ago that we think of it as starting in the early 50s, but I remember reading, not that I was around then, but I remember reading a quote somewhere from an editorial in the Seattle Post-Intelligencer in 1906 saying that this area is ripe for a summer celebration of the water. And that's what we've got in Seafair. Meantime, Rick Corelli is down by the water on a finger pier with one of the vintage boats. Rick?
I'm standing here on the Hawaii Kai with Jerry Hopp. They're frantic, Jerry.
Yeah, it's just like the old days of racing the old Allisons when we were actually racing out here. Trailer fired the thing to warm it up. Everything was looking good. And we trailer fired, we had an oil leak. Oil leak was filtered just almost like on a car, and the O-ring gasket blew out the side of the filter. So we took that off. We're going to bypass it, and we can't find the right part. So now we're putting the filter back on and getting the O-ring in straight, tightening it down. It's going to be close.
The excitement of racing old boats goes on. Back up to you, Steve.
Boy, O-rings and oil leaks. Don't hear about that much anymore. Let's take a commercial break. When we come back to Margaret Larson. She's down with one of those old boats. Talk about the kids who helped put it all together. We'll be back. We're going to go racing here soon, everybody, and we're hoping that some of the clouds break up just a little bit, but so far no rain out here over the race course. What we do have, however, are a lot of very fast boats, and we've got some traditional boats that bring back an awful lot of memories. Margaret Larson's down in the pits.
Steve, one of the Thunderboats is the Spirit of Miss South Park. Just about to take off here. There are 3 old Thunderboats going off in the Ivers Vintage Hydro race today in just a few minutes. This particular boat is so interesting because it was restored in part by some very special kids in the South Park area. We wanted to give you a look this morning. This is a chance of a lifetime for about a half dozen of Seattle's inner city kids. The chance to scrap and completely rebuild an old vintage hydroplane. In the 60s and 70s, this old boat was one of the top contenders on the race circuit. You may remember it as the Miss Burien. Today, the boat is in pieces, being reconstructed mostly with kid power.
That when we screw that down, that we're going to want to screw here.
David Williams is the main force behind the project.
It's the opportunity to be involved with something that is really very positive and very ego-building.
Williams is the director of the Hydroplane Museum in South Seattle. This is the 6th boat he's rebuilt, but the first time kids have worked on the project.
Well, I've always liked hydroplanes ever since I was little, and I heard about it through school and decided it was a good opportunity, and it kind of comes along once in a lifetime, so I'd take it, and it's been fun.
Tamika Young has only been working on the hydro for a week. It is the experience of a lifetime for a 9-year-old.
When I tell my friends, hey, look, there's my boat. I worked on that, I painted it, worked on the engine.
Steve Spasari is with me right now. He is a longtime Seafair volunteer and expert in these boats. What are these old Thunderboats going to mean to people who've been around here for a long time?
Well, I think this represents the tradition of the Seafair Unlimited Hydroplane race. Anybody that's a hydroplane fan, they all have a lump in their throat when they see these boats run. It's a thrill for all the hydroplane fans in the Pacific Northwest.
Give me a clue about the difference in the sound of these old boats and the modern boats and what that brings back in terms of memories for you.
Well, I think the Unlimited's actually lost something when they went to the turbines because we don't have the noise, but I grew up in West Seattle, and they'd be out here testing. I was a kid in school. I could hear them running here on the lake, so everybody remembers that. Everybody loves the roar.
This is a very special boat because of the kids who worked on it. Tell me a little bit more about its restoration.
Well, it's all done through the Antique Hydroplane Museum, and those people donate thousands of hours, worked hard. They barely got this ready, but they did it. They did a tremendous job. The boat looks beautiful.
What was the motivation this year to bring the Thunderboats back and get the Thunder back on Lake Washington?
Everybody likes the antiques. Everybody kind of goes back in their memory banks when they see them run. That's what we're trying to do. Just have everybody recall their memories of the great tradition of hydroplane racing.
Steve, let me ask you to step over here with me, and we'll take a look at the boat. What's happening as they get prepared to take off this morning?
Well, as you can see, these are not enclosed canopies anymore. Actually, they're just kind of joking and having a good time. We're about 2 minutes away. They'll just fire them up and head out.
We're going to see the Hawaii Kai come around the point, and then the Spirit of South Park here, and the Miss Thriftway, who's over just a little bit to the right, and the driver's getting ready over there as well. They'll all 3 take off. Is this a real race?
They're going to run side by side and run an antique hydroplane race exhibition, so they'll probably keep them pretty close together for the camera. However, I understand we may have a problem with the Hawaii Kai. It may not make it. They're having some engine problems over there, but the Thriftway and the South Park are ready to go.
Well, we're not going to have any trouble knowing when that is, because when these things fire up, you can hear it for miles.
That's true, and I think you'll hear a big roar along the beach too when people hear them too. They'll be excited to see them.
There are a lot of people gathering up now, trying to get a look at these boats and getting ready for this Ivers Vintage Hydro race in just a few moments, and we'll keep you posted. We'll get a look at these boats live when they take off. Steve?
Margaret, thanks very much. And as we await the boats, we've got people begin to line the shorelines here along Lake Washington. They've come out for the Unlimiteds. They've also come out to see the vintage hydroplanes as well. And we'll be back to bring it all to you after this.
The 1996 Texaco Cup at Seafair is brought to you by Texaco. Add more life to your car. Take it to the star. And by Southwest, official airline of Seafair, with low fares on every flight, every seat, every day. Fly Southwest Airlines, celebrating 25 years of love from Southwest to you. And by Dodge. See the great lineup of Dodge cars and trucks at your local Northwest Dodge dealer. And by U.S. West.
Wow, can you hear the Thunderboats? They are going out on the water. Hawaii Kai, Thriftway, Spirit of South Park, all heading out as your continuing coverage here on Kiro TV Channel 7 of the Texaco Cup at Seafair continues. Wow, what a great sound. Mike Fitzsimmons, that must bring back great memories for you.
I can't tell you. Seafair would like to thank Ivers for Ivers Vintage Unlimited Hydroplane Race. I'd like to thank Ivers, too, because that's a great thrill for me every time I hear these sounds and see these boats. These are the profiles of Seattle's racing history. These are the sounds that kids perhaps remember more than even the bell on the ice cream truck. This is definitely what hydroplane racing in our youth was all about, and I hope that every year we'll have a chance to just renew that sense again, John Walters, because what a thrill it is to hear these motors.
Yeah, it sure is. Every time I hear one of these things fire up and belch smoke and fire, it just reminds me of all my childhood memories and heroes, and I hope that they continue to run forever.
This boat, the Miss Thriftway that you just were seeing, was one of the all-time great unlimited hydroplanes back in a time when these fragile motors were quite unreliable. They ran 20 heats, 55 heats in one two-season period without an engine failure. Absolutely unbelievable. This particular boat is the Hawaii Kai. I just happened to have a clip from Jack Regas from 1958, who was called into action after this boat had been retired in 57 to come up here and drive this boat in the 58 Gold Cup.
Big thrill, just fantastic. And I wanted to drive so bad all year, the 58, and Kaiser wasn't racing. But then when he said, call me long distance, Jack, how soon did you get to Seattle? And I said, about 30 minutes ago, you got to go because we have to run the Gold Cup. And I was so happy I couldn't see straight that I come up here, and like I said, we had a lot of hard work. We had to learn to change a coil shaft in about 10 days, and we learned it, and we did it. In race time, we changed the coil shaft between each heat, which won the race for us. Otherwise, we would have won that race.
Jack Regas, of course, one of the greats of our youth, and he won the 58 Gold Cup here. The Miss Thriftway, one of my favorites. Bill Munson, such a powerful driver and such a grand series of seasons in this particular boat. And, of course, the Spirit of South Park. This boat is actually the rebuild of the Miss Burien, former Tempest. We think of guys like Chuck Hickling when we see this particular race boat out there. And of course, it was later the Savers Probe. Guys like Red Loomis were in the cockpits. Just some great names. And here they come to the line. 3 of the vintage unlimited hydroplanes making the sights and the sounds of Lake Washington. This is sort of the missing link to the past. Rocketing into that south turn. This was a time when, of course, Kiro didn't have quite the lenses they have now, and the drivers, when we could get close and personal right with them in the cockpit and see them bouncing around and taking all of the torque as they went through the turns and the inertia and all, and their heads just bobbling about. Those were the days, weren't they? Through turn number 1, the south turn. Of course, back in those days, they ran 3-mile race courses out here. We remember 1965, for example, when Bill Brow, the late Bill Brow, ran a 120.356 on that 3-mile course in the Miss Exide. That was the 4-minute mile of the day. What an incredible event that was, an achievement that was. Now 120 isn't even good enough to get in the race.
Yeah, it's amazing how the boats have increased the speed and just gotten so much more efficient over the years. And you watch the boats now and realize that like you said, 120 miles an hour. I can remember when people were running 120 mile an hour averages, and there were people that didn't believe that boats could ever be capable of going faster than that. And now, like you say, 120 miles an hour doesn't even get you in the show.
Spirit of South Park leads them into the north turn now, as the boats bunch up through turn number 2, the Thriftway Hawaii Kai. Ken Muscatell is at the wheel of the Spirit of South Park. He has been a real prime mover in the restoration of unlimited hydroplanes, vintage boats, to bring them out. There's something to be said, of course, about being able to see one of these race boats in a museum, but there's something else to be said about being able to see them and hear them out on the water where they really belong. These are no static museum pieces, believe me.
There's an awful lot of work involved in just keeping one of these things running, and so many of them were, had deteriorated to the point that it took thousands and thousands of hours in volunteer help to get these things back on the water. I, for one, think that many people around here should go to the museum and shake hands with these guys and thank them for the opportunity to go see these things like we can have it today.
David Williams does such a fantastic job with the kids working on this Spirit of South Park, as Margaret reported, and with the many hours of work that he puts in down there, and the production of some vintage films so that the museum can raise some money. The support is certainly always needed at the museum, and to see these 3 vintage hydroplanes out on the Ted Jones race course, it just doesn't get any better than that.
No, it sure doesn't. And it's just a wonderful feeling to be able to see these boats go out there and run, and knowing, myself having worked on wooden boats, how difficult it is to keep these things running and how much work is involved and how labor intensive they are to keep them running. It's amazing that we're able to see 3 of these guys go out there and run around side by side like this.
And John's not kidding when he says labor intensive. Today you can break a sponson and literally glue another one on. When you broke a sponson there, you also broke the frames through the center of the hull, and it was literally a rebuild, almost a complete reconstruction project. Sometimes you'd have to miss as many as 3 or 4 races in order to get the boat restored again.
Yeah, there were lots of times where a damaged hull by today's standards could be fixed in a couple of days. It took these guys out for the entire season. Everything is attached with aluminum and screws and glue, and there's no failure points where the parts just come off and you pull another piece out of a mold and stick it back together. These things rip and tear and stretch things, and they're much more difficult to repair.
Not an accident that the mecca of unlimited hydroplane racing, even in this era where these boats came from, happened to become Seattle, with the aerospace industry here and the materials and adhesives that were used by the aerospace industry. This became a natural venue for the place where boats would be built. And little by little, the entire momentum of the sport, the entire headquarters, if you will, shifted out here to the West Coast.
Mike, we want to jump in for a moment and tell you that while the vintage boats are taking to the water in the skies over Lake Washington, it's gotten very busy. These are the Red Baron Stearman Squadron. Red and white open cockpit biplanes with their smoke trail. They'll be performing maneuvers here now during this part of the air show. As we told you a bit earlier, at least one of the air show participants, crack Golden Knights parachute jumping team, had to cancel early on because of the low ceiling, but not the Stearman. These planes were first built back in the 1930s and 40s, so it's kind of apropos that we have 30s and 40s biplanes flying overhead and the vintage hydroplanes circling the course here on the waters of Lake Washington.
Steve, one is reminded of Mira Slovak, who used to climb in these vintage race boats and actually race, then climb in one of those airplanes and go out and entertain over the top of the race course back in those days.
I think those are what you call the barnstormers. I mean, those were the guys. Those were real men in those days, could do all those kinds of things. Race these boats, fly in those biplanes.
Indeed they were. And they were kind of cut of the same spirit. Well, of course, if you recall, Ivor Hagelin, of course, who founded the Ivor's restaurants, he was always such a big part of Seafair as well, and Ivor's so appropriate that they'd be involved with the vintage hydroplane race, because this was something that Ivor Hagelin would have loved to see in here.
Well, there they are. You're looking at the Hawaii Kai going by now.
They're having an oiling problem still. They're still spitting quite a lot of oil.
Yeah, it looks like it might be running just a little bit rich too. Maybe a carburetor adjustment. You see a little bit of black smoke there, like the automatic choke still stuck or something.
Well, we should probably then tell Margaret Larson she's very lucky she's not getting a ride along today. Otherwise, she'd have a face full of oil.
Yeah, that white driving uniform she had wouldn't be quite so white as she came.
She really did enjoy that, though. And I'll tell you what, there were a lot of guys at the station who have watched these hydroplanes, the vintage jobs over the years, who said, boy, I'd give anything for a ride like that. Give you another hint. Margaret's going to be flying with the Blue Angels coming up this week, so she's getting all the fun. The rest of us have to put in the long hours. She gets to fly and drive and everything else. What a great time.
Margaret gets all the best assignments.
That's right. All right, the squadron overhead, the Red Baron Stearman out of Marshall, Minnesota, Ryan Field there. They've been performing since 1984, and they continue overhead while the vintage hydroplanes circle probably one last time, and they'll be bringing them in. And then we're going to get ready to set the field again. Mike, you have a little unfinished business to take care of, do you not?
I do indeed. Seafair would like to thank Ivors for Ivors Vintage Hydroplane Race, the unlimited hydroplanes of yesteryear. There's lots more coming out on Lake Washington. You stay with us. We'll be back after these messages.
Take a look at a spectacular sight off into the distance of this cloudy Sunday morning here over the Northwest. The CH-47 helicopters, the Chinook helicopters from the 1st Corps from Fort Lewis, along with Command Parachute Team, will be coming by this. A spectacular shot from our Chopper 7. Clark Stahl and photographer Bill Heinlein up in the air above the lake. And we're just about set for the national anthem coming up here in just a couple of moments. The Marine Corps Band standing by just below us. Let's bring back Chip Hanauer for a moment. And Chip, we talk so much about power plants in the old boats. We're looking at some helicopters right here that have the power plants of the new boats.
Steve, you're looking at the airship that basically the engines and the hydroplanes came from. Now, obviously, these are the latest of those airships, but the engines that are being used in the hydroplanes came out of that very similar kind of helicopter that was used in the Vietnam War. Obviously, the helicopter has twin rotors, it has twin engines. The hydroplanes have one, but it pretty much is the same engine.
Spectacular sight as the helicopters approach. Again, they're coming from the north. They'll be flying over the Mercer Island floating bridge in a couple of moments in formation. And again, what a great shot from Chopper
beautiful.
7.
That is just beautiful. You know, the thing that's amazing to me is how they can get that flag to hang straight. You know, you'd think that thing would just get taken up behind it.
As they continue to approach, the old boats, the vintage hydroplanes, are slowly working their way back to the finger piers after a very, very successful run, almost deck to deck. Hawaii Kai had a bit of a problem catching up to the other two. There you see the Miss Thriftway.
You know, the Hawaii Kai, I have to say, is actually the first boat I ever raced.
Is that right?
That boat was that boat is actually not the Hawaii Kai. It was raced as the Barney Armstrong machine, and that was the very boat that I started my hydroplane career. And in fact, my first race I qualified for was right here in Seattle. So that's my old boat.
Wow.
I think it actually it's fared better over the years than I have.
And now our national anthem. The Marine Corps Band with the national anthem performing in the infield directly in front of our camera position. And a beautiful sight as the Chinook helicopters with the flag presentation fly by the pits. Meantime, speaking of the pits, Tony Ventrella is standing by there. Tony.
Steve, Ken Muscatel just in out of the boat, the Spirit of South Park, the Kiro boat. A little engine trouble there, you say?
Well, we blew out a big chunk of the supercharger. Take a look at the front of the motor. You see that right below the carburetor? There's a big hole there.
Oh my, oh my.
Well, we ran the last 2 laps that way. These old boats run. It was great. It was a lot of fun. God, I hope that everybody enjoyed it.
Part of the engine fly over your head?
Right over my head. I thought, what the heck was that?
Little nostalgia, though. It's fun to be out there, huh?
Right. Oh, it's to look over and see the Miss Thriftway and the Hawaii Kai next to me, and to hear the people, and you can almost hear over the roar of the people on the beach. It was wonderful.
All right, terrific, Ken. Good luck later today,
well,
too.
Actually, in 10 minutes.
That's right. All right. Let's toss it over to Rick Corella.
I'm standing down here on the dock with Jerry Hopp, a couple of old guys, and an old boat. That was a tremendous show out there. Did you have fun?
Well, that was fun out there racing. I think the excitement of the old days was there with trailer firing the boat and blowing a gasket on the oil filter. We got it screwed back together with 1 minute before we were supposed to go out in the course. Jump in the boat, fired up, the thing took off and went. And the 3 boats are out there racing around in circles, just having a great time.
it puts out a tremendous show. We're so happy to see that come back out here. And again, thanks to Ivers. I know they were a big support to get all you guys together and get you down here today.
Yeah, I'm glad they supported the museum and the boats, the Thriftway, the South Park, and the Hawaii Kai, and just all the volunteers that worked on this whole thing. I mean, we're still got an engine left and ready to go out and do it again.
We look forward to it. Back up to you, Steve.
All right, Richard Corella, thanks so much. Again, our shot from Chopper 7 as you're seeing the Chinook 47 helicopters flying overhead, heading over toward the log boom now, heading out to the east and toward Mercer Island. As they continue their flag presentation, we'll let you know that we've got Heat 1A coming up here in just about 14 minutes from now. Stand by, we're going to go racing pretty quick here at the Texaco Cup at Seafair.